On the 29th of May, 2015 in New York, this federal court handed down an unusual verdict in a case of drug trafficking. This young entrepreneur was given not one, but 2 life sentences, without possibility of parole.
That's what they're trying to do, is bury him alive for the rest of his life for something he did when he was 26 years old. That was complete. None of the charges they're all nonviolent, and it's unbelievable.
It was a devastating sentence for a young man with a bright future. Ross Ulbricht is from Texas, 6'3" with an ultra-bright smile, and he had a happy childhood.
He's a Boy Scout, sort of grew up in a kind of nice suburban home, went to college, got an education.
Very friendly, like just really a nice guy, which sounds crazy now, but he really just didn't have a bad bone in his body, but he wanted to be something and do something with his life.
The reason for such a harsh sentence was that Ross Ulbricht had created, alone in front of his computer, the ultimate dream of any trafficker, an online sales platform that was totally anonymous, an eBay for drugs, with over 13,000 kinds of psychotropics, from cannabis to heroin.
There was this anonymous dark market for drugs that no one could stop, where you could get away with buying and selling, absolutely, and there was nothing that the government could do about it.
From 2011 to 2013, Ross was public enemy number 1. Every federal agency in the country was after him. It was estimated that his website, Silk Road, had made over $180 million in just 2 years.
I think part of it was the money, but I think a big part of it was also the promise of doing something really grand and something that would really change the world.
He believed in free trade, and he believed in really just personal freedoms, and he really wanted people to be able to choose for themselves.
Was he aware at the time that he was really walking a tightrope?
From the suburbs of Austin to Silicon Valley, we've heard from his mother, his girlfriend, but also his lawyer, and journalists who covered the case.
And it was this incredibly dramatic thing, and as a story, it sort of had all the elements you want. You had drugs, you had scandal, you had secrecy, you had someone making a lot of money doing something they probably shouldn't have been doing.
With previously unseen family images, we'll follow the trail of a young man whose life flipped between geek culture, militancy, and criminality. Far, far away from the twists and turns of the dark web, Ross was born on the 27th of March, 1984 in Austin. It's a young, trendy city in the heart of Texas. Austin is one of the few bastions of the Democratic Party in this conservative southern state, a bohemian oasis in the heart of the Bible Belt. 2 opposing sides of America coexist there. It's a heady mix that would influence Ross's destiny.
Austin is weird because it's pretty liberal, but it's also still Texas, and so it's kind of a weird mix of ideas. Sort of conservative Texas, but in the heart of it, there's this kind of liberal hub, and it's a college town, so there's a lot of forward thinking. And of course, South by Southwest is there. There's a lot of technology. So yeah, it's kind of a weird mix in a strange city.
Ross grew up here in a comfortable suburb of detached houses for the upper middle class. It was a happy, sheltered childhood spent in this pretty Victorian house. This was in the late 1980s. Lynn, Ross's mother, calmly envisaged the future of her youngest son.
Even as a baby and a child, he was just very laid back. He's also very, very sweet and compassionate and cares about people and very easygoing. He's always, just easy person.
In Austin, Julia V knew the Ulbricht family well. Later, she was to be Ross's girlfriend for 4 years. and this intellectual, very close, slightly bohemian family treated her like one of their own.
His parents are really, really sweet. They're really hardworking entrepreneurs. They, his dad is an architect and designer, so he designs and builds houses, and he built houses in Costa Rica, and so he was always had a really great life.
Now we're gonna go for a walk to Casa Bamboo. It's a 2-story Swiss Robinson house, 3 bedrooms, downstairs living room and the kitchen.
Ross's parents owned some land in Costa Rica. They built these eco-lodges, which they rent to tourists. This was where Kirk and Lynn Ulbricht and their 2 children spent the summer.
We have the place in Costa Rica, so, that's very outdoorsy, and surfing and being out in nature. It's in the jungle. And so, yeah, he, liked being outside and his friends, and he would go camping and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Ross's teenage years weren't typical of a future criminal. Surfing, football, basketball. He played all the sports that are part of American culture. For 10 years, Ross also attended the Austin Scouts troop every weekend. At the age of 17, he'd even reached the highest rank, Eagle Scout.
Eagle Scout is like the highest level of Boy Scout that you can be, and you have to do a lot of work to get there, and not that many people stay in the Boy Scouts till adulthood, and it's, kind of this emblem of being like a good kid and working really hard to get this thing.
Oh, he's going inside!
Oh,
Cheater!
As he grew up, Ross became a handsome young man of 6'3". He could have been the star of a TV show.
Just a fascinating character. He just had such promise. He excelled in everything he did. He was academically successful, he was socially successful.
Ross was a brilliant student who easily gained a university scholarship. At the age of 22, he left the sunshine of his native Texas to go to one of the best universities in the country, Penn State. There were 85,000 students on the campus in Pennsylvania, in the north of the United States. This austere university would be a turning point in the young Texan's life. Having been top of his class in physics since high school, Ross enrolled for a master's in materials science and engineering. He specialized in the study of crystals, aiming to get a doctorate. It was here at Penn State that he met his girlfriend, Julia. She was studying photography. It was love at first sight.
He bought me this silver ring, and then he attached this crystal that he had cut in the shape of a diamond, and it was really sweet, and he had just glued it on. So it wasn't perfect or anything, but it was really cute, and I was like, that's so awesome, using science as art, and yeah, it was a cool gift.
For 2 years, Ross worked on his materials science thesis. But in his free time, he was developing a definite passion for a different discipline: American politics.
Well, I think it's very common, especially when you're young, to seek out new political ideas. In many ways, this is very common in university. You read something and you get turned on to an idea, and you want to explore that with people your age who are going through a similar realization.
For Ross, politics was much more than just a fad. In his student dorm, as he read more widely, his ideas were becoming more and more radical. He found his niche when he discovered the works of Ludwig von Mises, an Austrian economist and theorist on a movement that was particularly influential in the United States, libertarianism. It's a political philosophy that borrows from anarchism, but mainly from ultra-capitalism. Libertarians believe that government restricts individual liberties and the state is their #1 enemy.
He thought that the government should not be involved in people's lives, but he was a sort of interesting type of libertarian. Most libertarians in the United States are kind of, you know, guns and beer, and Ross had actually come from a sort of hippie family, you know, a 1960s hippie family, and you know, he was passionate about this idea of freedom in the way that I think hippies were.
During 2009, Ross started to express his unorthodox ideas publicly.
For him and I, we differed in so many ways. Like, I was definitely raised a Democrat, so to kind of go from, well, I really feel like the government should be taking care of human rights, like healthcare and all these things, to, oh no, the government needs to not exist, like, to me was kind of like crazy and unheard of.
Totally unexpectedly, Ross gave up physics and left the university. He wanted to devote all his time to politics.
At the time, I wish I was like, why are you doing this? You know, but you know, as I said, my husband and I are entrepreneurs, and I think he was feeling constrained by graduate school, and he had all these ideas, and he, you know, I think was feeling like it wasn't interesting. What he just said to me, it's just not passionate for me. It's just not interesting for me anymore.
At that time, he spent a lot of time with Donnie Palmertree, a former student in Pennsylvania who'd become a good friend.
You kind of grow up in college. I think you both grew up, and he did specifically, realizing that he didn't want to be a physics professor or work for a company and just work behind a desk being a physics guy until he's 65 and retire.
At the age of 24, Ross, the polite and helpful Boy Scout, had changed into a passionate, idealistic libertarian militant. He went back to Austin with a single idea in mind: to change the world. Ross hung out in his hometown's alternative circles and became close to anarchist and anti-government groups.
Trying to look for, just look for what he wanted to do. I know he wanted to do something big. I mean, he wanted to try to be, that's the thing about Ross, he wanted to be somebody, not in a bad way. He just wanted to be, do something in the world to make a difference. And he was an entrepreneur too, he wanted to make money.
That was the paradox of Ross Ulbricht. For him, political activism went hand in hand with financial success. It was like wanting to be Che Guevara and Steve Jobs at the same time. Still dreaming of greatness, in January 2010, he moved into this small apartment in Austin. His girlfriend of 2 years, Julia V, soon moved in with him. They argued a lot, but Ross was madly in love. For months, Ross moved from one job to another.
So he wanted to make a video game, basically, and he got some funding for it, but then it kind of flopped. So that was really his only plan, and then he also was into trading, so he did that for a while, and then he sold insurance for like a month or two, then he did like editing. So no, he didn't really know what he wanted to do, I guess.
These failures undermined his confidence. Ross hated this period, especially as he was sure he had a great future ahead of him. It was around this time he started keeping a diary in which he wrote,
"This was extremely discouraging. There I was with nothing. My investment company came to nothing. My game company came to nothing. I went through a lot over the past year. In my personal relationships as well. I had mostly shut myself off from people because I feel ashamed of where my life was. I had left my promising career as a scientist to be an investment advisor and entrepreneur and came up empty-handed."
He seemed to be an idealist, very much an idealist, maybe very arrogant.
Okay, so you try one, it doesn't work. try another, it doesn't work. Pretty soon, this whole idea of yourself is kind of on the line. And it can be a desperate moment.
His friend, Donny Palmtree, suggested they work together. Donny had set up Good Wagon, a startup which collected second-hand books and sold them online. Ross was given the job of creating the website.
He hadn't built a website before. I was like, we gotta build this Good Wagon Books website. He's like, I'll do it. He didn't know how to build a website, he just went and did it. I mean, he could go figure it out. And that's why we clicked so well, is because we both had that, like, we will figure out some way to do it if we have to do it. So that's what, it was good, because he was like that. He wasn't afraid of anything.
In early January 2011, Donny had to go to Dallas on business. He left Ross in charge. His task was to complete the inventory of 50,000 second-hand books in this warehouse. It was a big job. But whenever he had a moment, Ross would sit at his computer and work on his own for hours and hours every day, neglecting Donny's business.
In January, he called me up one night and said, Donny, I feel really bad. I haven't been spending as much time as I would have liked. He wasn't clear. He just said, I have a very big idea that I've been working on. That's part of the reason why I haven't been doing Good Wagon very much.
This big idea was the epiphany Ross had been waiting for since he left university. The revolutionary idea that would change his life. That day, he wrote in his diary,
The idea is to create a website where people could buy anything anonymously, with no trail whatsoever that could lead back to them. I've been studying the technology for a while, but I need a business model and a strategy.
a website where you could buy anything without anyone knowing. An online sales platform to circumvent the law, which he considered illegitimate.
He believed fundamentally that the government did not have a right to prevent people from buying these substances and using them. And it just wasn't the government's business at all. And so if he could develop a way to do that and a way to let people do that without the government being able to hold them accountable, that would be a social good.
He felt like people should be able to consume what they want to consume. If someone wants to smoke weed and they should be able to do it. So that was his idea with the website.
In all good businesses, the choice of the name is crucial.
I was calling it Underground Brokers, but eventually settled on Silk Road.
The name was taken from the merchant routes which existed between Europe and Asia 2,000 years ago, and completely transformed trading relations across the world. The reference was just like Ross, hugely ambitious. Julia was the only person Ross confided in.
I just remember him showing me the little logo and being like, oh, look, which logo do you like best? You know, and it was just like kind of like a business idea, like just one of Ross's other ideas, really.
Silk Road wasn't just another idea. But there was still a significant challenge: how to remain anonymous on the internet.
If you go to buy something on Amazon, there are two ways that they will be able to find you. You're going to the website, so it has your IP address, which is basically the home base of your computer, and is connected to your name in various ways. And they'll say, oh, okay, someone from this IP address came and visited Amazon.com, and you want to buy a bunch of socks. And then how are you going to pay for those socks that you're buying on Amazon? Well, you have to give them your credit card number, and then you're in the payment system, which is connected to law enforcement and visible in various ways.
For Silk Road to work, Ross had to solve these two technological challenges of IP addresses and online payments.
Silk Road attacked that in two ways. One is it said you're only going to be able to get here through Tor, which is a very well-vetted system for hiding your identity on the internet.
By using Tor, You cannot be traced. It appears as though you are accessing a website from an entirely different internet protocol address than you actually are. So for instance, if I use the Tor browser to visit someone else's website, it appears as though I'm visiting from, say, Germany or France or Czechoslovakia instead of San Francisco, the United States.
Since 2009, it's been possible to download Tor freely. Used by both human rights supporters and criminal organizations, this browser, symbolized by an onion, allows people to circumvent monitoring by changing IP address, rather like a geographical location.
So what about payment? Well, you're only going to be able to pay in Bitcoin, which at the time was a fairly new digital currency that you could have an anonymous wallet.
Bitcoin is a virtual currency which allows transactions to be anonymous. The young Texan had already been interested in it for a few months.
The really important thing about it is that there's no authority, central company running it who can stop payments or who collects information about the people using the system. Anybody can use it. You don't have to give any personal information. And so that made these sort of anonymous payments being sent around the world possible.
With anonymous payments in Bitcoin and the disguising of IP addresses using Tor, the basics were in place. On the 15th of January 2011, the Silk Road website went live.
He showed me all the kind of technologies involved, and at that point, he obviously didn't have anything on the website. So to me, I just thought, cool. I had no idea that it was going to become what it became, obviously.
Then Ross, this brilliant 27-year-old, upon whom fortune had always smiled, made a deliberate decision to break the law.
He crossed the line. And this turned out to be a lot of people cross lines, but the line he crossed turned out to be a little bit more profound or a little bit more entrenched.
Ross had a plan. He asked a friend to lend him this unoccupied little country house on the outskirts of Austin. For 3 weeks, the former physicist locked himself away from prying eyes to grow psychedelic mushrooms.
He grew mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, and he was actually selling them through the website, Silk Road, so he was trying to get it jump-started by dealing through his own website.
Ross was very determined to make Silk Road into a huge success. In a few days, he sold 5 kilograms of his mushrooms on the site. Around that time, Nicholas Christin, a researcher and specialist in computer security, discovered Silk Road. He quickly started a study for Carnegie Mellon University in Pennsylvania.
It was a live test to show that it was possible to use Bitcoin to pay. It was possible to receive the goods you'd ordered. And the first comments we saw were, "Wow, I can't believe it works. It's great."
And on certain specialist forums, it was all people were talking about. Within weeks, many consumers had started using this new eBay that was 100% anonymous. More and more dealers were also offering a wide variety of drugs.
There were psychedelic drugs, there were things like heroin, cocaine, there was a fair bit of marijuana, and it was just all going through the United States mail.
Key to its success was home delivery, usually via the postal service. If you wanted to get drugs delivered, there was no more need to use false names and addresses. Nothing could be easier, and buyers were even protected by a law in America.
There's an interesting thing in the United States. If you get something delivered to your home, as long as you don't sign for it, you can always say, "I didn't order it. Someone sent it to me." So you have plausible denial in the case where you get caught receiving illegal goods by post.
On all these sales, Ross received a generous commission of 7% for each transaction. The success of Silk Road was given an extra boost on the 1st of June 2011 when an article appeared on Gawker, a widely read blog in the United States.
As a result, the user base of the Silk Road boomed, maybe tenfold even. You see just a huge spike in usage of the Silk Road.
From then on, sales on Silk Road were in the thousands of dollars. Almost 1 million accounts were set up over a few days. Its success was so remarkable that a few days after publication of the article on Gawker, Senator Charles Schumer, a Democrat, called for federal authorities to close down the site.
It was such an extraordinary challenge to governmental authority that it had to be shut down.
On the Senate floor, they're talking about this website is threatening our youth. I don't think we realized at the time that that was setting in motion the sort of wheels that were going to destroy all of this. It wasn't just talk. Once they said that on the Senate, the FBI started paying attention, other people started paying attention, and he was kind of a marked man after that.
From his small apartment in Austin, Ross, this gentle dreamer alone in front of his computer, became public enemy number 1 in the United States in less than 6 months.
The US government, my main enemy, is aware of me, and some of its members are calling for my destruction. This is the biggest force-wielding organization on the planet. I am mentally taxed, and now I feel extremely vulnerable and scared.
As Ross faltered, a manhunt was being organized in Washington. The largest police and federal security agencies in the country started working together. The Silk Road operation brought together the FBI and the Secret Services, but also Customs, Homeland Security, and the Drug Enforcement Administration. In all, about 30 federal agents were assigned to find the person who'd been defying their authority for months.
It was very big. They put, it meant a lot. They were really, they really wanted to get who was, like, the guy who was behind the Silk Road.
At the same time, Ross was under attack on another front. He was having trouble maintaining the security of his website.
A hacker found some major flaws in my code. He came back with basically, "This is amateur shit." I knew it too.
From the start, the Texan had run the site on his own. He used very basic software to constantly code and recode his platform.
The website was very poorly designed. He wasn't very good at coding. He sort of had to patch things together as he went. And actually, you can see this over the course of the trial. You see stuff in his diary and in chat logs about basically piecing things together as he goes, basically going from one panic to the next.
Ross spent all his time on it. Silk Road quickly became the center of his life.
Between answering messages, processing transactions, and updating the codebase to fix the constant security holes, I have very little time left in the day for my girlfriend.
He was acting shifty and kind of like weird, if that makes sense. Like his personality would kind of change time to time. And I really just think it's stress. I mean, after a certain point, you know, when you have so much stress in your body, it's poisoning your body. Like It's actually changing your mental outlooks.
In late 2011, Julia and Ross split up for good.
For many years, I thought Ross was it. Like, he was the coolest guy I could ever imagine being with. And he was so, fun and handsome and smart and all the things I wanted. So it's like, how could you not want this? And I remember I actually had been photographed in a wedding dress, and I had this whole romantic notion, all this stuff, and he just totally shot it down. And I remember crying, like, why wouldn't you want to do this? And he's like, I have more important things I need to worry about.
There was now nothing to keep Ross in Austin. He went westwards to try his luck. In early 2012, he moved to San Francisco, the city of the gold rush, and where everything's possible on the west coast of America. All the great internet companies were born here. A multitude of startups maintain the myth of the self-made man.
Well, there's this especially in the tech world, there's this myth of success. I mean, and not just in the tech world, where bright young kid has a good idea, has the tools he needs to make it happen, and he makes it happen, and then 5 years later, he's running the world.
He came to California, it seems, based on his diary because he wanted to make a lot of money. He wanted basically to be the next Steve Jobs.
Seeming to sometimes forget that his business was totally illegal, Ross imagined himself as a tycoon of Silicon Valley. His website was then making nearly $100 million of sales per year. A month after he arrived, Ross recorded this video with a friend who didn't know the real nature of Ross's business.
Crazy thing about San Francisco is it feels like home already.
Yeah.
It's like just like you said, I gotta get out of here. just come. Just come. There's no reason not to.
Ross lived here in the Glen Park neighborhood, a haven of peace in the center of San Francisco. It's a quiet area where he kept a low profile.
He was living very simply. He wasn't, he didn't need a lot of money. He never has been one to need a lot of money or care about material things very much.
He was living with roommates. He didn't have his own apartment. He had his, little bedroom in the back of apartment with other kids.
From his bedroom, he continued to manage Silk Road without telling his roommates. On the site, everyone knew that one person was keeping it running without knowing exactly who it was. Sellers and buyers were in contact with admin for administrator. But Ross seemed to be looking for recognition. He was to find a way to exist and be admired by his disciples, the users of this site.
There was one day that you could see the chat logs where Variety Jones said, you need a moniker that isn't just admin, you need something, a name that you can pass on to other people so it's not just you.
I need a name. Drum roll, please. My new name is Dread Pirate Roberts.
Dread Pirate Roberts, or DPR. Ross took this pseudonym from the 1987 film The Princess Bride, because the hero, a good pirate, is a cult character in geek culture.
And it's this, part of what's interesting about it is, it's this idea of this pirate where he does terrible things. Like, the Dread Pirate Roberts kills people and kidnaps people and does all this stuff, but he's still sort of this swashbuckling figure and you still end up rooting for him. And the whole enterprise of, like, I'm gonna be this terrible, terrible pirate is kind of redeemed by his good intentions.
It was a clever choice, which fitted perfectly with Ross's fantasies.
From the start, this whole thing was a very ideological project. And so there was sort of this cult of personality that grew around him. He'd talk about sort of the grand mission of the website. It was very grandiose words.
But once he turned his computer off, Ross couldn't get used to his life in the shadows, to this virtual fame that he could never celebrate. On the 29th of December 2012, when he returned home after a date with a girl, he wrote,
I went out with Jessica. Our conversation was somewhat deep. I felt compelled to reveal myself to her. It was terrible. I told her I have secrets. I'm so stupid. I always thought honesty was the best policy, and now I don't know what to do.
Clearly, Ross couldn't carry on alone. But it was hard for him to find trustworthy employees. He wasn't sleeping and was becoming paranoid. Exhausted, he again confided in a friend while remaining vague about his work.
I think it's, I imagine that there's some silver lining, though, to that experience, and also to, like, pushing yourself to a limit like that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I think people who haven't done that, and I've had similar experiences with my work where it's like that becomes everything more important than anything.
With the site's success, the scams multiplied. In early 2013, over $300,000 were being traded every day. The hackers were on the alert, and bad dealers weren't paying their commission.
He got a fair number of death threats. He got blackmailed many times. Hackers would take down his website, and then he would pay them ransoms. This was actually a very regular occurrence. He was just bleeding out money constantly from hacking attacks.
4th of February 2013. Got death threat from someone. Death from above. 5th of February 2013. Attacks continued.
You don't know these people. They're very angry at you. They're somewhere on the internet. How much of a threat to you do they really pose? That can be really hard to gauge because, again, you don't know anything about them. So, I mean, anyone would have trouble sleeping.
He can't really talk to his friends about what's going on, right? Like, he can't talk to any of his real-life friends about what's going on. He's talking to these anonymous strangers on the internet instead about his problems. You can kind of see what his state of mind would be at this point. This isn't a way for like a normal person to live. And so eventually you start thinking that you're like a mafia don.
In his small bedroom in San Francisco, Ross was wary of everyone. But one user gradually managed to win his confidence. He spent a lot of time chatting online with someone calling himself Knob. He claimed to be a big shot in the Mexican mafia. Ross was worried. He suspected a seller of stealing bitcoins from him. He asked for Knob's help. Then, a few days later, Ross changed his mind and contacted Knob. The murder was never committed. Unknowingly, Ross had ordered a hit not from a member of the mafia, but an undercover agent of the Drug Enforcement Agency. Knob was one of the many agents who had infiltrated Silk Road months before to try to catch the young man.
Being in this world in which he wasn't interacting with other real people, he was just interacting with, screen names and online avatars. And I think he sort of became detached from the humanity of the people he was dealing with. And I think you can see in his journals and his diaries that evolution of Ross as he became more callous and eventually reached the point where he was willing to order hits on people, to order people killed. You really viewed this as this project that was more important than any one person. And, you reminded of so many other sort of revolutionaries who ultimately reached a point where they were willing to kill for their idea. And he became, the kind of dictator in this world that he had invented to sort of get rid of dictators and authority.
Ross had committed a fatal error. He'd crossed the red line. But for the moment, nothing linked him to his avatar, the dread pirate Roberts.
At the time, there were already, probably 10 different agencies in different cities in America working on the Silk Road case. And, they'd been working on it for 2 years, and it was a sort of embarrassment that none of them had really made much progress. They still had no idea who the dread pirate Roberts was.
It was one of the smallest agencies involved in the investigation, the IRS, the American Tax Police, which made the biggest breakthrough in summer 2013.
An agent who wasn't named at the time, had basically come across Ross's email address through Google searches. And it wasn't at all clear at the time how this played into the various other elements of the investigation, but it seemed like Ross's name, the first time it had surfaced, was not through, some sophisticated hacking technique. It just was a Google search.
2 years earlier, when he'd launched Silk Road, Ross had promoted his site on a few forums. He'd then deleted these messages, but he made one small error. As they combed through thousands of web pages, the federal agents came across a message linked to Silk Road that was signed with an email address. ross.ulbricht@gmail.com.
There were 200 things to think of, and you thought of 199 of them, but you didn't think of that one. And that's how they got it.
Then a second phase of the investigation began, using social media. The IRS agents simply analyzed Ross's public profiles on LinkedIn and Facebook. He became the main suspect, who happened to share the same libertarian opinions as the dread pirate of Silk Road.
Oh, Ross Ulbricht, this matches up very closely with the profile of the dread pirate Roberts that you can see through the dread pirate Roberts writing.
What they had going for them was that they had the name of Ross Ulbricht. They had an email address. They strongly suspected that he was DPR, but to be able to prove it with as much certainty as possible, they had to show a correlation between the moment Ross Ulbricht went online and the appearance of DPR.
In order to do that, in September 2013 in San Francisco, physical surveillance of Ross was organized. In all, about 10 federal agents crisscrossed the quiet neighborhood of Glen Park daily. They were following the young entrepreneur's comings and goings, watching his habits. On the 1st of October 2013, the agents followed the Texan. As usual, Ross went out looking for an internet connection and a quiet place to work.
He was in a public library using the internet. They knew that he went there because he could use the internet there and they wouldn't be able to trace it back to him.
Ross sat down on the second floor with his computer in the library's science fiction area. At 3:14 p.m., the dread pirate Roberts connected to the Silk Road website.
Ross was chatting as DPR on the computer, and he had this admin page of Silk Road open called Mastermind. And so he had the admin page open, he was talking to another admin.
2 FBI agents are working behind him, and the 2 FBI agents, a man and a woman, pretend to have a fight. And Ross turns around.
You a stupid ass bitch. I know that. Damn, you know what, let's go, bitch.
And in the moment he turns around, the female agent grabs the laptop.
Let's go. Get your bitch, let's go.
They were holding the laptop open because as soon as it closed, it would be worthless. And so they had to like keep it from falling asleep, keep it open, keep it from dying, and that's how they got a lot of the evidence.
The investigators managed to prevent Ross deleting any compromising files when he was arrested.
At the time, like, he not only has, the chat window open with where he's talking to the moderator, he also has the Silk Road website open, logged into the admin page. And then beyond that, they have his diary. They have the accounting spreadsheets. They have all the chat logs that he logged on his own computer.
At the age of 29, on the 1st of October 2013, Ross was arrested and charged with drug trafficking, computer hacking, and money laundering. On his computer, they found 144,000 bitcoins, nearly $86 million at the time.
I got a call from, it was because she was kind of like an old friend, and I hadn't seen her in years, and I was like, why is she calling me? And she's like, Julia. And I'm like, what? She's like, Google Ross Ulbricht. And I was like, and then it was Ross Ulbricht arrested. And I remember falling, like my phone dropped. I remember falling on the floor, just bawling my eyes out. Because I knew he was gone for life. I just knew at that moment when he had been arrested, I was wailing. I was like, it's over, his life's over.
My life's never been the same since that day. And we were desperate. We didn't know what to do. We were getting advice from all these people. it was just really hard. And meanwhile, Ross wasn't able to call us. And he finally did. And that was so, the whole thing was just a nightmare. It really was.
Ross was transferred to New York and placed in detention pending trial at 150 Park Row, the federal prison. His request for bail was refused. A year and a half later, on the 13th of January 2015, one of the most important trials in cybercriminality started at the federal court in South Manhattan. With experience in defending difficult clients, such as one of the accomplices of the 9/11 terrorists, Joshua Drakel was Ross's lawyer.
I think it was the first case that brought together several elements of the computer age. One is the cyber aspect of it, just totally a website. Second is Tor, the underground nature of the website. Third is Bitcoin, and that it was the first criminal case, I think, that existed where Bitcoin was an element of the case. So you brought all those together, and you have a very, very different type of case.
On the 13th of January 2013, in the pouring rain of New York, the cameras of the world were watching the trial of the creator of the dark web's biggest online sales platform.
Silk Road attracts a lot of libertarian, anarchist, activists, people who really believe in what Silk Road was doing. And so there was a weird mix of like hippie, anarchist, Bitcoin supporters, and then federal agents coming, and a lot of journalists. And so the courtroom was like a mix of a lot of different things.
Ross pleaded not guilty to the 7 charges against him.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth? Okay, may put down your hands. Listen to my whole question. Please raise your hand if you got any.
The first surprise was that the young man admitted creating the Silk Road website.
Our defense was that it was his creation, but that very early on, before it mushroomed into what it became, that he had divested himself of his interest in it. Our position also is that there were multiple DPRs, Dread Pirate Robertses, throughout the course of the website.
I learned at trial that he had created it, but it also made sense to me that he got out of it, because he's not a criminal. He doesn't have a criminal mind. He doesn't have that kind of ambition.
Ross's defense was based on the testimony of his family, his appearance, his history. How could this gentle boy have become a drug baron?
One of the amazing things, I think, during the trial was the degree to which Ross had sort of cleaned up his appearance to look like this kind of bland, sweet suburban boy. He didn't have any of the kind of hippie wildness that you see in the pictures from while he was running the Silk Road, and I think that was in part to kind of convince the jury that he was this sweet Boy Scout who, you know, didn't really match up with the Dread Pirate Roberts.
He, seemed pretty neutral and kind of calm throughout the trial, and soft-spoken and very polite to the judge, and he kept turning around in his seat and like talking to his family and kind of saying like it's okay and trying to comfort his family members.
He was just like, trying to comfort us, and that's just so him, and that image of him like that has just been, haunted me.
My whole question.
Federal Judge Catherine Forrest presided over the trial.
Any source regarding this case over the recent.
She said just because you don't look like a typical criminal doesn't make what you did any better. She said, in fact, it makes it worse. She was saying the fact that you have a good upbringing and you're well off and your family is well off doesn't make you any better than the drug dealer I sentenced from the Bronx last week. Like, you guys are the same, you've done the same thing. In fact, what you've done is worse because you had all this privilege and you could have had such a better life and you threw it away doing this.
On the 4th of February 2015, Ross Ulbricht was found guilty of all 7 charges against him by unanimous decision of the jury.
If any of you have any trouble hearing at any time.
3 months later, at the federal court in New York, the sentence was handed down. At the age of 32, he was given 2 life sentences without possibility of parole, an exemplary sentence.
He was definitely upset when he was being sentenced. I don't know if it's because he was going to jail forever or because he actually felt remorse, but he did like cry when he apologized to the families that their kids died. And so I think at some point he did kind of realize what he'd done and that it wasn't just a little libertarian experiment.
It was heartbreaking, and it literally broke my heart. I ended up in the hospital a few months later. I don't have heart disease, but I almost died. And they say it's broken heart syndrome.
Since May 2015, Ross Ulbricht has been incarcerated at the Metropolitan Detention Center in South Manhattan.
The detention center here is a very, very, very difficult environment. It's overcrowded, it's understaffed, the medical attention, psychiatric attention is almost non-existent from what you would get on the outside.
At the start of 2016, Joshua Dratel appealed the conviction. Of course, the closure of Silk Road hasn't stopped the trading. Online selling sites for drugs are now 4 times more numerous. As for Ross Ulbricht, he may not have changed the world as he dreamed, but he is now a symbol for libertarian activists all over the world.